We wanted to give you a brief overview of where we were prior to MICIP, as Hilda mentioned. We had pockets of systemic and high impact practices and strategies. We know that with the assist, we used to write plans, submit plans, and then go back to our business in the buildings, right? And look at those high impact strategies and try to enhance them. But they were, I don't want to say in limited pockets, that we had many of them. But I would say at the district level, we did not have systems. The one systemic practice that we had at the district level was this SIP walkthrough that we did through the buildings. And we identified learning environments. If you are familiar with the Elliott tool, this resembles the Elliott tool. We did borrow some learning environments from there, but at the same time, we took our strategic plan and we also embedded the learning environments in our strategic plan, like student engagement, like students creating their own goals, the culture and climate of the building. So there were 9 components there that we looked for. Because this practice was high impactful in our view and what we've seen in buildings, we continued with it under MICIP, and we will show you how we tweaked it to make sure that it's focused on what the goal is currently for Dearborn Public Schools, what strategies the buildings were tagged with, and also the activities. We also had another systemic practice in the district that we felt that really helped the MICIP process, which is the comprehensive needs assessment and the data presentations. And these followed specific protocols in the district. And we will go over that. So if you look at this slide, really our goal is continuous improvement at the building level, not only at the district level. We know that the district guides the building. And we figured that if we reimagined our school improvement plans to be high impactful and also implemented with integrity at the building levels, then we can see impact on student achievement, which is addressing the very real disconnect between the purpose of the plan and its actual use. Like I mentioned earlier with Assist, we had the plans, we submitted them, and then we went back to thinking, oh, PLC would work better. But really, if you look, PLC was not necessarily in every plan, even though like PLC was really the focus of every building, but we're not sure how impactful PLC was in each of the buildings, even for those that claimed that PLC was their strategies and activities and tasks in the plan. Do we have a shared understanding, and did we put effort into develop that shared understanding prior to MICIP? So we put this quote here, and we put it for our principals when we started creating that mind shift, because we really needed to realize what is it that we're doing versus what should we be doing.
So one of the first pieces of the puzzle when we were first introduced to, I guess, like Fatmi was alluding to, this mind shift. And I can remember pre-COVID sitting at a meeting at Lansing at MDE, right? When they were first introducing what MICIP was going to be. And we're like, what is this? What's it look like? And they talked about the whole child, and they talked about, you know, the mind, how the change in thinking, and how we're, like Fatmi also alluded to, changing from a system, what it was just, you know, do the plan, put it on the shelf and forget about it and go back to business as usual. And we knew we needed a team at the district level, one that would help guide our, you know, discuss, I guess, hash out what this is going to look like, take it back to our schools. And we had always had a district school improvement committee. That was something that we felt from the get-go from years ago, and we met regularly to decide what's working, what's not, how can we support our schools. While transitioning now to a district MICIP committee, this was going to be the group that was going to spearhead this work. It was one, it needed to be well represented. And so it was reassuring to see that many of I guess, the thinking and the beliefs that we had aligned perfectly with what was expected in the continuous improvement process that the state was introducing to us. And so it was well represented by various stakeholders. We made sure our EL department, our English language department was represented our school or special education coordinators. We had representation from elementary as well as secondary. We had classroom teachers there. We had central office staff. Myself from assessment. We made sure we had someone there coming in from business services, because of course the funding part would be important. And all of that was really what it would look like, again, at the building level, because at the end of the day, if it didn't make sense to our administrators and to our teachers, it was never going to translate into something that was doable and something that we could definitely monitor and continue with.
Thank you.
Want to add something before? I was going to say, I think
Yeah.
our district MICIP committee, yep.
Yeah, so the
Big
next
rocks.
slide talks about really the big rocks. One of the things is we assessed what do we have in place? How do we leverage what we have in place? What language is common amongst teachers and leaders in buildings? And also, how do you get, instead of the word buy-in, we've been using the word commitments. What are teachers committed to? And what misunderstandings do we have? So we wanted to start with, we implemented an activity part of the CNA called Initiative Inventory, and we learned that through the MICIP series. Every building went through the initiative inventory, but before we did that, we did it at the district level. When we did the initiative inventory, we found that PLC was the common process that every building is working at, as well as the district. And the bulk of our budget is spent on PLC, going to professional developments, conferences. MTSS is thrown around in everything we do. There's actually an MTSS meeting, an MTSS day. How do we dissolve these misunderstandings so that we create a mind shift of the MTSS is really everything that goes on about learning in the classroom from the time students enter until the time they leave falls under MTSS. It's not that meeting on Monday morning. Is there a shared understanding amongst teaching staff who are the most important and impactful individuals that stand in front of students? How are these measured? Are we measuring integrity of implementation? We talk about tier 1 strong instruction. Do people understand that this really falls under MTSS and it is the main building block of an effective MTSS process? PLC, the 4 questions. Do people understand that MTSS and PLC are braided? And how do we leverage that as part of the MICIP process to make sure that we have continuous improvement? So I have to be honest with you, and Hilda knows this, that up until today, we are working on dissolving this misunderstanding, because when you want to undo learning, it's much more difficult than establishing learning, because these are wrong perceptions and wrong practices that have been in place for so many years. We've been hearing PLC for the last 18 years, as far as I remember, ever since I started in this district. So we needed to not only create a mind shift, but also dissolve misunderstandings. And this is the process that we're going through. The pre-planning stage really is where MTSS starts. So we made sure all departments are represented so that people are not delivering different messages. The shared understanding has to start within us at the district level through my MICIP committee and then down to the leadership teams and to the teachers. So we wanted to make sure this is in place. I know that we're very passionate about this because we realize our current reality and we realize our gaps, and we are nowhere near perfect in this. We continue to grow I think our conversations, we had a principal filling in for a long-term administrator in a building who came back. She's retired, and she sat with us through our administrative meetings in central office last month as we go through these. And she said, one of the comments she made is that the level of conversations among leaders is way different than she had experienced in the past. She talked about the common vocabularies that we're using, the common understanding of the individual practices at the building levels, and the systemic thinking that she noticed. She really made a comment about that. And it is true. That's what we strive to create at the district level. We've dedicated all of the principals' meetings on a monthly basis to be unpacking this process and resolving misunderstandings as well. I know I spent a lot of time on this slide.
That's okay.
It's really important. This is really the
It really
basis
is.
for all the work.
One thing I do want to add to this, prior to coming into this role, I worked with supporting our new teachers in the new teacher program. And while Fatmi was focusing in on the leadership part and with our administrators, we always, at the end of the day, wanted to reassure our teachers, especially many of them new coming in, that it's not that we're introducing something new here. It's aligning what they are doing, reaffirming their work, and trying to bring consistency in our practices. So having that common language, having that common understanding of what you're doing is the right work. We just want to work smarter, not harder. So we really want to make sure that when we have a student A going from one building to the next, that they see that the plan continues. So it makes the life of the teacher easier. It makes the student have an easier transition from school to school. And at the end of the day, it provides us at the district level with a monitoring process and protocol that makes sense. So we have expectations that are clear at all of our schools.
Thank you, Hilda. So when we went to the principals to present the roadmap moving forward, if you move to the next slide,
sure.
We had committed that we are not adding anything new.
No.
We have identified the big rocks in the district that we hear the conversations about all the time. And we made sure that these will be our strategies and activities moving forward. And the big task is really to refine and unpack those to make sure that we create common understandings across the board. So we went back and forth with the principals, and every time we moved at the district committee level, we went back to the principals to collect feedback and adjust the strategies and the activities as we put them in the plan. So we have the big goal, which is college and career readiness and student growth and achievement. And then we decided at the MICIP committee that we need two main strategies and also activities under those strategies. And how do we make sure that we are not treating MTSS as a different entity or process than the PLC process? How do we embed those in the, how does it translate to the building level? And based on the comprehensive needs assessment and initiative inventory, the MICIP committee came to the conclusion that the PLC process would be the best route for our district to take to implement the MTSS process with fidelity and integrity. We like to use the word integrity because it makes a difference when people understand that it's really truly what's happening on the ground. It's not a checkbox. And that's how we define the difference between integrity and fidelity. Fidelity would be more like a checkbox. I did this, this, and this, and I submitted. Integrity is really assessing day in and day out what the practices are, how are they happening, what impact are they leaving, and through observations and other metrics that they're using in buildings. So we try to marry these two terms, honestly, and the best tool we found to use for that was the RTI at Work book through Solution Tree. And really, Solution Tree is what we turn to because people are invested in that. And they know it's a research-based best practice, and they will continue to function through the PLC process. So we figured that's the best way to tackle the MICIP process.
Fatmi mentioned MTSS and that it's not just the meeting. It's not just, the students that we need to provide intervention for. I think if anything, COVID really opened our eyes, not just in Dearborn, but I think across the country, across the world, about how important mentally, physically, emotionally, if a student or a teacher for that, for that example, is not ready to learn, it's never going to happen. And it was right before we went into shutdown. I can still remember the last district school improvement meeting, because it wasn't MICIP yet, we were at, and we were having this conversation. So we kind of had a sense that it was coming, how important it was to be looking at the social emotional needs of students. And we were developing a survey. I still remember being in that room. It was probably maybe a week before, if you recall, Fatmi. And we were there looking at survey data, developing a survey that we were going to send out, looking at how we can really embed social emotional learning in what our day in, day out practices. And then the world changed. And coming back, when we were developing our goal post-COVID, post-pandemic, we wholeheartedly believed that academic was not going to happen if affective was not in place. And we chose not to do two separate goals because we felt the two had to go hand in hand. And so I feel like that graphic right there really embodies our belief at the district level. And when we've introduced this to our building administrators, to all of our teachers, everybody nods their head and goes, yeah, this is us. This is the work we want to do. This is what we believe in. And so you'll see now when Fatmi shares how we have our goals set up with the strategies, that the two are at equal billing. And we always make sure one can't happen without the other.
And we wanted to make sure also that we are not implementing both in each one in isolation of the other. We wanted to create also a shared understanding that social emotional learning, and we've been using that term, is learning that takes the well-being of individuals into account. Social emotional learning is not putting academics on the side and implementing some activities in advisory and then going back to your normal business in academics. It's the empathy that teachers demonstrate while communicating with the students. How do we embed it from the time students enter the building until the time they leave the building and beyond? It is not really one activity or one advisory implemented activity that buildings will take and put in their plans. So this is one struggle, I will say. And as much as you create common or shared understandings about this, you still need more. It's not easy coming. And we continue to model through our meetings how we can implement a quick activity in the beginning to demonstrate that people need to know each other. People need to create relationships. The question that you ask students when they first enter your classroom, this is SEL. And the minute you isolate it into its own curriculum, it's not really infused into the daily practice.
So to build that shared understanding, like Fatmi was alluding to, we knew that we would need to have a framework that we could rely on, something that was research-based, something that could easily be translated and adapted and made accessible to our staff and to our students. And so we went with the CASEL competencies that many of you would would be accessing. And we introduced them to all of our administrators. We introduced them to all of our staff. We developed, what does it look like? How did you understand this? Can you define it? What can it look like in school? How do we, like I said, marry it with the academic expectation? And we've been through this now several times, several go-arounds from the start of the year to now. And we really are trying to constantly revisit what it can, like I said, dissolve those misconceptions. But again, how do you understand this so that we can move it forward? Did you want me to share on that link there for the?
Yeah, can you click on that link? This is an activity that leadership teams from buildings in the monthly meeting went over to develop that shared understanding, to brainstorm where they are in terms of MTSS academic and MTSS affective. And again, we chose to use these two strategies under MICIP. And we limited the strategies to two. We wanted to make sure every activity that we implement in buildings fell under one of them. Another concept that we kept in mind as we were developing the MICIP goals, strategies, and activities is, as much as we can, is to streamline. We don't want to go to buildings and say, you need to implement EDP. It is a MDE requirement. So we made sure that we took all of these requirements and we fit them under one of the two strategies. So if we go back to the next slide, you will see that the two strategies are MTSS academic and MTSS effective. We went back to the principals group and their leadership teams from the buildings, examined what the proposed strategies were by the MTSS, by the MICIP committee, and then went back and forth to refine these. If